From JUDA Studios, this is This Prophetic Life, the podcast covering life in God's promised land. I'm your host, Micah of Morsheth. You know, prophets get a reputation for being doomsayers, but there's always more to the story. Our story today is about chaos, judgment, and justice, yes, but it's also about hope. Today we're breaking the story down into 3 acts: the chaos of injustice, the call for a new kind of leadership, and the hope of restoration. So, let's get into it. Act 1, the chaos of injustice. Picture this. The mountains are melting like wax. The valleys are splitting open. The earth itself seems to protest as God steps down from his throne. That's where our story begins. A dramatic entrance because the rebellion of Samaria and Jerusalem is no small matter. 700 years prior, God appeared in dramatic fashion on Mount Sinai to deliver his covenant with his people. But not this time. Not in this vision. Yahweh's wrath for centuries of rebellion by his people is evident. Here's what was happening. Samaria, the capital of Israel, had become a center of idolatry. Jerusalem, the home of God's temple, was drowning in corruption, and people had turned from God, chasing wealth and bowing to false gods. Judgment was inevitable, but could it not be? It wasn't just the cities, you see. Through me, God called out the land grabbers. Well, you know the type. They lie awake at night, plotting how to take what's not theirs, and when morning comes, they act on it. They exploit the vulnerable, and their greed knows no bounds. God, he saw all of it. Even King Ahab himself he saw, and he had something to say. You're losing everything that you've stolen. Think about this. Greed and exploitation aren't relics of the past. Whether it's billionaires hoarding wealth or just someone cheating a neighbor, injustice still runs deep today. Our rebellion echoes that of Israel and Judah. Our own selfishness causes us to turn away from the Lord. Act 2, the calling and the Messiah. Let's talk about leadership. And I'm not going to hold back here. Rulers, priests, and prophets, you aren't leading the people. You're devouring them. Here's the line that people still quote. You hate good and you love evil. You tear the skin from my people and the flesh from their bones. Graphic? Yes. Necessary? Also yes. These leaders were exploiting the poor, taking bribes, bending the law, taking land from the poor, even though the Torah, the law, declared it illegal to permanently sell land from families, including the poor ones. People's security, even their hope, they were all robbed from them, and even the prophets were corrupt, speaking God's word only if someone paid them. Justice, you see, had just become a transaction. But here's the twist. When disaster strikes, these same leaders will be crying out to God. And God, he won't answer. Why? Because they ignored him all along. God's judgments will take the form of oppressive nations, the Assyrians, and eventually Babylon, coming to take out the northern kingdom, Jerusalem, and even their temple. But the story doesn't end there. I saw a vision of something better. A day when people from every nation would stream to God's mountain, saying, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord. He will teach us his ways." Wars, they will end. Swords will be turned into plowshares. Peace will reign. And then there's the promise of the Messiah. Out of Bethlehem, small, humble Bethlehem, not powerful like the rulers in Jerusalem, but Bethlehem would come a ruler, not just any ruler either, but one that would rule over the restored people of God. Someone who would shepherd his people and bring real, lasting peace. One that doesn't take advantage of others, but would sacrifice himself instead. That's someone, Jesus Christ. In his kingdom, his people, the remnant of his faithful, they will be a blessing among the nations. What about you, dear listener? Today, leadership matters, whether you're running a country, a company, or just your own family. Are you using your influence to serve others or just yourself? And when it comes to hope, let's remember this. True peace doesn't come from politics or money. It comes from Jesus, the ultimate shepherd. And he, the shepherd, that babe born in Bethlehem, Jesus, he wants to restore you. He wants to bring hope to you, his people. Acts 3, the hope of restoration. We return to a familiar pattern, a warning followed by hope. We open with a courtroom scene, and God himself brings a case against Israel. He asks, "My people, what have I done for you? How have I burdened you? Answer me this." He reminds them of his faithfulness, how he delivered them from Egypt and guided them through the wilderness. And the people, they ask, "Well, what can we do to make it right? Bigger sacrifices, thousands of rams, rivers of olive oil, even our firstborn?" But God's response is beautifully simple. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Just as God's new ruler, his Messiah, would come not out of power, but out of lowly Bethlehem, God's expectations for us, his people, are not bigger and better sacrifices for him. He just wants us. He wants us to reflect him. He wants us to walk with him, to act with justice, his justice, the kind that he takes care of. Not justice where those in power get off and the meek, they still suffer, but justice where he pays the price and we live in that mercy. And love that mercy and live that mercy as we interact with others. The mercy that removes our pride, and we live in humbleness then because God is great. Yes, Judah, you will still face judgment, but God's mercy will prevail. He will forgive. He will cast sins into the depths of the sea, and he will remain faithful to his promises. Dear listener, do you have the hope that comes from living a life with God's justice? Who in your life needs your mercy, that mercy that Yahweh pours out on you right now? And are you walking humbly with God or chasing your own ambitions? The good news God's mercy is still available for you always. That wraps up today's episode of This Prophetic Life. Thank you for joining me as we explore the chaos, the calling, and the comfort and hope found in Yahweh's Word. Remember, God's message is just as relevant now as it was then. Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Our hope, our eternal hope, rests entirely in Him. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can find this and all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, this is Micah, signing off.